discovered that when you're a mom, you've got like this magnetic pole similar to the sun, and everything is just underneath your feet all the time, and I'm slowly accepting that. Blow the fucking spider webs off this beast. It's really cool. My most recent XSR renter was a female, and she was really worried about the seat height because she's short. And then I was worried about that too because I just had someone drop the bike because they said it was too tall. I was like, I get that, but your whole job on a motorcycle is to keep it upright. With that being said, I never dropped a fucking motorcycle until I owed thousands of dollars on it. Didn't drop my first bike, didn't drop my second bike, but then my third bike. Nope, never dropped my third bike either. But my fourth bike was the Ducati Scrambler, and I dropped the shit out of that bike. I was like, oh, I owe 11. Oops. And that was the only thing that made me nervous. Also, the handlebars on that thing are so cheap, they just fucking went sideways the second it hit the ground. And then you're done with it, and you're like, you just trade it in and get a different bike. But my most recent renter on the XSR 900 was a female, right? And she's short, and she's worried about the seat height. So I pull out this fart peeling just in case, even though that's taller, but it's just easier to maneuver. And she was like, no, it's fine. I've got a Daytona 675 and I'm really excited to try the XSR 900. She said, once you get going, you don't need to be able to put both feet down. And I was like, there you go. Suddenly I was no longer worried about her renting my motorcycle. I was like, she gets it. You're mostly moving on the bike. And if you can get one toe down, that's really all that matters. I think it's different when you're like riding in the mountains like I was on the Pan America and I was tiptoeing that thing everywhere. And then you just like, because your footing isn't great, but when you're just city riding, it doesn't matter. She had a blast on it. She's like, you're really gonna sell it? And I was like, everyone's gonna say that forever. It's a fucking rad bike. It's one of the sexiest bikes ever, but it literally collects dust. And I'd rather somebody just take this from me and give it a good home versus just being a garage piece in my stable. It's too sexy to just sit in a garage. There was an entire spider web from handlebar down to like the fucking radiator. I was like, oh God, I really need to post it on Craigslist. And then you get on it and you're like, well, never mind. And it's just like I love being on the XSR just going 80 to 80 from each stoplight. That's where it lives. Anyways, since I'm on my way to therapy, I'm going to tell you guys what I'm thinking about. So I have these mentorship classes about essentially talking to dead people because I've had some outrageously ineffable experiences, and it's mostly just meditating all the time is what you're supposed to do. But we were talking about joy. And I was like, joy, that's a funny thing I don't ever think about. And I was just fucking thinking about how my joy is totally buried not only in like daily stressors or just the minutia of existing, but it's buried in trauma, buried in anxiety. And obviously I ride motorcycles, but then they became my job, and then it was less about joy and more about like getting work done, which was really weird. And for somebody who's already having a hard time wrangling in joy into their life, you know, you kind of just flick it off of this delicate balance and into work, and it just crumbles. And then I was thinking about all the times where I don't do something because it's gonna just be too much of a challenge to set it up or get it together, or like today, for example, I'm running late because mom stuff, and I wasn't gonna ride my motorcycle to therapy. And it's really hot, it's like 100 degrees, and I have all black. And I was like, fuck that. Riding a motorcycle, whether it is only 2 miles from my house, it still brings me a fuck ton of joy if I'm not thinking about work. And I'm not talking about joy with you guys, so that's different. It's effortless. And I think joy is a really quiet voice in probably a lot of people's brains, because it's just like naturally a back burner sort of thing. I believe those aspects of us have to be unearthed, and you have to like be aware of it, which is kind of rocking my world. I'm like, oh, I'm a happy person. Like, sure, I've got as much anxiety or depression as the next, which I just think is part of modern civilization. I think everybody to some degree has that level. Also, I have this sneaking suspicion, the more intelligent you are, the more you kind of are apt to deal with different types of psychosis, because your brain is just functioning at a higher RPM, so you're just putting more stress on it, and the wear and tear is different than maybe somebody who isn't, motorcycle analogy, revving as high on their power band. So I want everybody who watches this to just think about joy. Like, what the fuck? You're like, is joy going on a roller coaster, or is it going to an amusement park, or do you only find it on your birthday? And I feel like joy is not to be confused with like habitual grounding techniques, where whatever you do to unwind, whatever that may be. I think joy is not habitual. I think joy is spontaneous and ever-changing and is rejuvenating, where I feel like habitual unwinding techniques are more grounding. They more just kind of like allow you to just function like a regular person. And that's, I think, where motorcycling came for me. It's like I've just been commuting and riding giant bikes on the highway. I very rarely veer off from that to do something that's going to bring me joy, like perhaps dirt biking or riding on the track. And I am now realizing that I gotta break the habit and do that stuff, and it's not that hard. Okay, the brakes on the XSR definitely need to be changed. They're not what they once were. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, if you wear all black in Texas in the summer heat, you will be fucking hotter than Satan's cock. I'm so glad that car saw me. Whenever a car's pulling out and they're going in a direction where they're not naturally looking at you and they see you, do you ever feel like you just gained like 25 fucking XP points? All right, more on joy when I get back. All right, what were we talking about? Joy and how to get rid of it and never see it again. Lock it up where no one can find it, and then use drugs and alcohol to unearth it. No, I'm just kidding. If you're like me and you had like a rough upbringing, and then you're out on your own at 16 working and paying bills, there is no time for joy. I think that's what really made me so enamored with motorcycles. Like, I bet you I still have it saved on some backup of a hard drive, but it's like I saw one Deus Ex Machina fucking Zanga post. That was it. My life completely blasted onto a rocket ship to infinity of motorcycles. And I'm sure some traumatized part of me was desperately seeking the salve of a hobby, and I found it. But then it still kind of gets caught up in the same flavor of everything else, which is stress. I'm always fucking with these mirrors. Feels good to just fuck with them though. You have to start paying attention to the tiny voice. The really small voices in your head that speak really quietly, that have flabby communication muscles, right? Because we don't ever let them speak and we don't ever talk to them. They don't ever talk to us, or when they do, it's just buried. And so what my therapist suggested is I connect to my daughter's joy, which is often through playing or tickling or me being absolutely insane and shouting some sort of poop humor into the ether, and paying attention to that sort of joy, because I guess the origin of this, right, is spiritual. And I have never really, like, none of the spiritual stuff has resonated with me, because the best way I could put it is spiritual stuff or metaphysical stuff is Renaissance, and then I'm more sci-fi, even though it's like, to me, metaphysics could so easily be sci-fi. So maybe the symbolism that they talk about, sunshines and rainbows and whatnot, it's like well, what does that look like for modern man? And not just a hippie. Or, I mean, not that metaphysicians are hippies, but they are to some degree. But like, what if you're a motorcycle nerd? I remember having a bad trip once and it was all centered around the engine. So maybe I could retranslate it into pistons and firing chambers and... All right, so for all of you viewers, you have some homework. I want to know what people's joy voice is saying. I want to know how quiet it is. I want to know your moment of hearing it for the first time, whether it was recently or a long time ago. Man, I want to know, because I don't know what it looks like to me, and obviously for everybody it's going to look super different. And then fucking shoot a comment. Tell me all about it, because I'm really curious. And I think I'm one of those people that needs examples, just to see them and chew on them and feel it out and use my intuition to guide me to an example that might kickstart or match strike a really important thought in me. So maybe if we can cultivate a bunch of people telling us what joy looks like in their lives, that might fucking strike your own matchbox. And who knows what happens from there? You know, what happens if we're all recharging our fucking joy vessel? I bet a lot of people will continue to quit their jobs and become motorcycle vloggers. Don't do that. Only do that if you're financially supported by someone else. I'm having this realization. I think I like the XSR 900 more than I like the FTR Carbon. There's just, I don't know, this has just so much more grit. But the FTR is badass, but if you had to ask me which one I wanted, I think I would pick the XSR. Also just gets a fucking 10 out of 10 in the looks department. Not the new ones though. God, the new ones suck. I'm sure they fixed some stuff, but goddamn. How could they just blow it like that?